Songbirds are the only birds who truly sing. They make up half of the world's birds, about 5,000 species, from the thrush to the blackbird to the lark. And yet, incredibly, these birds are disappearing from every corner of the globe. Songbird populations have plummeted by 50% in just 40 years, the greatest decline in human history. They are amongst the most mobile creatures on Earth, traveling up to thousands of kilometers from north to south every year. Many of them are lost along the way. Migrating songbirds depend on more than one landscape to survive, from summer nesting grounds to tropical wintering grounds. But they must increasingly share their homes with an ever-present neighbor, us. We have already cleared 2/3 of the world's natural habitats, and if we continue at the same pace, the rest could disappear within one human generation.
Nature is music. Humans made music and sang before they even knew how to talk.
Dominic Uhlberg is a musician whose techno compositions are written using a rather unusual source of instrumentation.
And for the hi-hat, I took the chiff-chaffs. And of course, a good track needs vocals. And there's a bird who sings very good vocals. It's coming now. It's a boo-boo-boo-boo.
Dominic's musical inspiration comes from the chorus of birds we call collectively songbirds. They've been the natural soundtrack to our planet for millions of years.
We want to hear the birds, so a bit of silence, please. When someone recognizes a bird, they can tell me.
A blackbird.
Yes, a blackbird. How did you know?
Because it's so beautiful.
It's interesting that Janina said that. The bird that we hear is the bird with a song that's most easily recognizable in relation to what humans know. That's why it's so harmonious and beautiful to us. The bird that sings most clearly in a major key is the common blackbird. That's why we find it so beautiful, so melodious. Every culture, every civilization hears it the same way. I took the example of Richard Wagner, who sometimes in his operas retranscribes one by one bird songs.
The song of the songbird relates to a special apparatus it has in its throat for singing. And what that allows a bird to do is to sing two separate songs at the same time. And by intricately controlling In the shape of everything in the syrinx, the bird can sing a duet with itself.
Birdsong is music to our ears. But for birds, it's intrinsically linked to their survival. Males sing for two reasons: to defend their territories and to attract a mate.
And when it comes to reproductive competition, a male who does not sing very much, his female will sneak next door and mate with a neighbor who sings more. If he doesn't sing well, he will not father any offspring.
When we hear birdsong, it seems incredibly complex. But in fact, we're missing almost 90% of its content. But nothing escapes the ears of a demanding female bird. Any interference in communication could mess up a male's chances of attracting his mate. But lately, it's getting harder and harder for him to be heard.
What has changed in the last 100 years, and particularly in the last 50, is the appearance of traffic, and with it the emergence of bass tones. Aeroplanes produce a low tone, a noise with low frequency, as do cars. And there's a lot of traffic now in the cities and on highways, of course.
The chiffchaff
is an interesting species. First, because of its name, people who know nothing about birds can recognize it by its song. The chiffchaff sings a chiff, a high sound, then a chaff, a low sound, and alternates them.
In Leiden, Holland, biologist Hans Slabberkorn suspects the chiffchaff's song is being altered in some way by the noise of our busy cities. To test his theory, he compares the songs of birds living close to noisy highways and those in the quieter forest.
And in just a few songs, we saw that the chiffchaffs had started to sing higher. This is the recording without the highway sounds. There are some introductory notes. That's also the chiffchaff.
The low tones emitted by daily traffic noise quite literally steamroll over the chiffchaff's song. To adapt, the birds sing in a higher register.
Are those birds changing their song in order to be heard by their mates? What we don't know is, if their singing is compromised, are they still able to deliver the same message? This would be a threat to the species. Interesting studies were done in Canada on the effects of noise. They place microphones in the forest near oil exploitations.
The noise question has kind of been out there for the last 20 years, and what we're starting to find is that noise is simply interfering with communication. Noisy environments that are very similar in terms of habitat structure and composition to a quiet environment, the males in the noisy environment simply weren't able to attract the females as well as the guys in the quiet environment. On compressor station noise, what we found is about a 15% difference in the ability of the males to attract a female to that area.
More noise means less reproductive success, and that means fewer chicks. But chicks who are born into noisy environments, like these compressor stations, also have less chance of surviving. Their parents simply can't hear their cries of hunger. Which is particularly worrisome when these compressor stations are smack dab in the middle of the world's largest bird breeding habitat, the Great Boreal Forest.
Just the size of the boreal forest, it goes all the way around the northern hemisphere. I mean, a lot of people can't even fathom it. In April and May, you can watch carbon dioxide levels drop because the trees have started to photosynthesize.
Every spring, about 7 billion birds come to Canada's boreal to mate and produce offspring. So many, they call it North America's bird nursery. Songbirds live in all kinds of environments, but by far the most important is forest, supporting an overwhelming 76% of the world's birds.
It's a male, CPS.
The boreal forest is therefore a crucial home for songbirds. But it's also a very important resource for humans.
Alberta is a very energy-rich province. We have huge deposits of oil, of natural gas. And so there's kind of a competition between the habitat the birds need and the resources that people want. I am interested in conservation. I am concerned about birds, but I'm also a realist. The energy sector in Alberta is the driver of our economy. It essentially pays for the vast majority of jobs in the province. It pays for many of our social services. I mean, people need to make a living, and we need those resources. This is a recently cleared well pad. This is a 1 hectare loss of forest. On its own, 1 hectare is a small amount. 1 hectare 100,000 times is 100,000 hectares of forest. There's about 3 or 4 birds per hectare in the boreal forest. That's about 500,000 birds. Habitat is being lost to these kind of things every year.
Alberta's boreal is fragmented by 88,000 oil and gas well sites. Future development could leave much of the remaining forest within 250 meters of a road, pipeline, or well site. This development crisscrosses the landscape, degrading the core forest habitat some songbirds need to survive.
For me, the fundamental component comes down to habitat loss. A forest is not a habitat. A forest is a type of vegetation. A habitat is the things a species needs. And if we remove those, and they're gone, the species goes with it.
Birds rely on a specific combination of flora, fauna, and climate to survive. It all depends on what kinds of insects or seeds they eat, how they forage, or how they build their nests. Thousands of years of evolution have linked birds to these precise habitats. Birds like the Canada warbler.
The Canada warbler has declined in all parts of the country, and there's some concerns that that's related to loss of old-growth forest habitat, which is the thing they prefer.
Some songbirds need trees that are older than 100 years. But it's more cost-efficient to cut them down before they reach that age.
The question is, how much old growth are we going to allow to persist into the future so that we have some number of birds? And I think that's the big social decision, is you have a trade-off. You can't have both.
Every year, the Earth loses 13 million hectares of forest cover. Even when just patches of forest are removed, the landscape subtly changes. Trees are still there, but fragmentation creates more and more edges, where forest now meets pastureland or human development. This introduces new and surprising predators.
I can see the eggs clearly. Nest will still be protected from on top, and we'll get a dynamite view.
I know, that's true.
The wood thrush is another songbird experiencing a deep decline, and scientists think they know why. A predator is literally stealing wood thrush eggs from their nests.
We've studied now wood thrushes since 1996 in the region of Waterloo, and we found and monitored almost 900 nests. And about half of the nests fall prey to predators, yet we've never seen a predator at a wood thrush nest. We got some miniature video cameras and installed them at the nest. And to your right, to the right. To the right. Now, whoa, whoa, that's it. Good. Got a good view. So picture this. The wood thrush has been sitting on the eggs on the nest all night, through the dead of night. And the wood thrush, like us, has to take a bathroom break, has to have a little bit of a snack, so she leaves the nest.
It doesn't take long for the egg thief to appear. Surprisingly, it's another songbird, the much bigger cowbird.
And the usual modus operandi of a cowbird would be, on the first visit to a nest, to remove one egg. Then she may come back and do this with a second egg, pitch it over the side of the nest, and then she flies off. And then she may return in about 5 minutes and lays one of her own eggs in there. Cowbirds are brood parasites, and that's just a fancy way of saying that cowbirds don't build their own nests, nor do they care for their own eggs or young. Rather, they foist these duties on other birds.
When a cowbird egg hatches, the unwitting songbird parents will feed these enormous chicks as if they were their own, boosting the population of their arch predator at the expense of their own young. Hundreds of years ago, wood thrushes and cowbirds coexisted in relative harmony, separated into their distinct habitats. The wood thrushes in the forest and the cowbirds in the open prairies. European settlement changed all that, removing huge tracts of forest in favor of farmers' fields and suburban lawns. It's excellent for cowbirds, but devastating for wood thrushes, and that means even worse for forests.
The songbirds are a really important part of the forest ecosystem. I call them nature's blue-collar workers because they have important jobs that we may not appreciate. One is that they're predators on insects, so they provide natural insect control. Another one is that they help trees and shrubs and other kinds of plants reproduce, because if they eat fruit, then when they fly away, they'll be able to plant that seed for the tree. Because birds have such important jobs in the environment, when we start cutting back on the habitat that's available to them, you get fewer birds using that forest, and now those jobs aren't getting done, and so you get into this vicious downward spiral. So the health of the forest is going to deteriorate really rapidly.
Bridget Stutchbury is not just a renowned biologist, she's also a self-proclaimed bird detective. The current mystery she's trying to solve is what is happening to the northern populations of purple martins. Could they be losing important forest habitat somewhere along their migration routes?
So we're studying purple martins because they're members of a group known as aerial insectivores. So they fly around catching the insects in the air. And this group of birds, not just in North America, but all around the world, have shown steep declines in numbers. And so the question is, why are the aerial insectivores, as a group, in so much trouble? And the purple martins are one way to answer this question.
To solve her mystery, Stutchbury needs to know exactly where the birds fly every year. Weeks before they're scheduled to head south on their fall migration, she gathers the purple martins and places a small tracking device called a geolocator on the birds' backs. This tiny computer will then record and archive daily light levels for the next year.
And the little light sensors at the tip here that is held above the feathers, we can get the locations from the timing of sunrise and sunset. Just double check that it's the proper tightness. It feels good. There's no substitute for just giving it the scientific wiggle.
But this tiny instrument can only reveal its stash of information when and if the bird returns to precisely the same site next spring in order for Stutchbury to download the data. In the meantime, there's nothing to do but wait.
The northern populations of purple martins are the ones that are declining. And one of the theories for that is that the northern populations might be going to southern Brazil, where it's largely deforested, it's heavily agricultural, and birds are very sensitive to pesticides. So by tracking them, we can answer that question. Where is that bird going? Where is it going to spend the winter? Because that tells us which kind of habitat needs protection.
The two groups of birds that are declining really rapidly are the aerial insectivores, which are in the steepest declines, but we also see declines in farmland birds or grassland birds, the birds that tend to be associated with farms and agriculture. And curiously, in both North America and in Europe, we're seeing the same kind of patterns.
What is happening to songbirds who live far from the forest? Their habitat couldn't be more different, yet their numbers are dropping at even more alarming rates. In Canada, the normally abundant tree swallow is in trouble. It's one of the many birds here who share something in common. They eat insects. Here in the vast prairies of Saskatchewan, there should be more than enough insects to keep the tree swallow populations healthy. But scientists are discovering a different story.
So we're still getting a picture of what's happening with these birds, but we do know that they are actually in poor condition at some of these intensive agriculture sites.
20.5. Yep.
Their chicks are also showing the same kind of profile.
Yeah, well, that's quite light for a bird of that size.
So it means that they're probably not getting as much food.
Christy Morris's suspicions are now falling on one of Saskatchewan's most important crops. 21 million acres of canola are planted every year in the prairies, and almost all are treated with a powerful new generation of pesticide called neonicotinoids.
Neonicotinoids are a group of pesticides that kill insects extremely effectively. It's just applied to the coating of a seed, and the plant takes the pesticide up with it as it grows. So in many cases, farmers don't have to spray large amounts of chemicals. They can just put their seeds in the ground and have protection to their plants.
This is supposed to make neonicotinoids much less harmful to the surrounding plants and animals. But are neonicotinoids as benign as they appear?
The insecticide is actually very water soluble. perhaps these pesticides are moving into places like wetlands and possibly killing what we call beneficial insects, insects that are not the species of crop pests that are targeted by the insecticide.
If toxic neonicotinoids are somehow finding their way into the water system, could they be killing insect larvae in ponds and rivers as they develop into adults?
So most of these insects actually have a larval stage that's in the water. Mosquitoes and midges, these are important food for the birds. If the wetlands aren't healthy, they're not producing insects. So if we don't have insects, then we actually don't have birds. It's as simple as that. So if we disrupt that pattern, we basically are disrupting the whole ecosystem, not just what's in the pond, but everything around it.
The water collected by Christie's team is tested for the 4 most common neonicotinoids. These samples were taken in the early spring before new seeds were planted, so they should be free of the pesticide.
And there it is.
And there it is. All but 2 have had one
neonicotinoid.
If not 2.
We now have spring hits before seeding on all these samples. That's a bit scary.
Batch.
Neonicotinoids are present in 90% of the spring water samples, proving that the pesticide is persistent in the environment from year to year.
Amazing. We actually may have underestimated how pervasive the problem is. That even during spring, before farmers have put seeds in the ground that have been treated, these chemicals are showing up in water.
Oh, yes.
Yay!
There's nestlings too.
This nest has 6 little nestlings, and it's got 3 more that are going to hatch. So this is a huge amount of work for the parents. Not always will all 9 live. You need healthy reproduction and you need survival in order for the population to remain stable. But habitat that does not support healthy birds will eventually cause the population to crash. Neonicotinoids have their place. However, they are not suitable for use at the scale that we are using them at. The regulators need to look at them very carefully to evaluate how and when they're used.
Birds are really sensitive to their environment, both in terms of the weather, in terms of food supply, in terms of pesticides. They have a very high metabolic rate. They have a very short lifespan naturally. So when something's wrong with the environment, often the first place you see it is by affecting bird population sizes. Songbird numbers have dropped by about 50% already, and the forecasts for the next 20 or 30 years in the near future is for them to go down by at least another 25%. So when you have an ecosystem where birds are an integral part of the health of the ecosystem, and you take them out of the ecosystem, you can expect what's left to fall apart.
It's a vicious circle. Without proper habitats, birds decline. Without birds, habitats decline even further. It's a slow process, difficult to notice when populations drop by just 1 or 2% every year. But over decades, these losses compound. What will happen to our finely balanced ecosystems if we lose our most common birds? It's hard to say with total certainty, but history has at least one lesson to tell us. In 1957, Mao Zedong ordered all tree sparrows to be killed because they ate too much grain. All across China, these birds were driven to the skies, forced to fly until they died of exhaustion. Mao's campaign was successful, causing the near extinction of sparrows. But without natural predators, insects devastated the crops, contributing to a famine that caused the deaths of over 30 million people. Can we reverse this vicious circle? Can we find a way to protect songbirds while continuing to exploit the natural resources humans need to survive? In Costa Rica, scientists think they have found a solution. This tiny country is home to over 800 species of birds, more than all of North America combined. But it's also home to a robust coffee industry. Here too, habitat destruction has taken its toll. In the last 60 years, Costa Rica has cleared 80% of its forests, primarily for agriculture, including coffee. The future of songbirds here might hinge on a tiny little insect.
Coffee berry water, it's a tiny beetle that drills a hole within the coffee berry. It's originally from Africa as the coffee plant. So basically it's a big problem because it will go on the coffee berry when it's ripe. It'll basically live inside it and lay their eggs and have the whole breeding cycle completed within the berry. And that will destroy the coffee berry.
The berry borer costs farmers big bucks, chewing its way through half of the nation's coffee crops. Today, most coffee is grown in an open field under full sun. The land is stripped, then earth and crops are doused with agrochemicals, depriving songbirds of essential food and habitat.
We drink the coffee, we like the chocolate, so we need coffee plantations. We need production and we need agriculture. So let's find a way to do it better.
This is the coffee shrub. Then we have some other taller trees and banana plants. Right here, there's a cocoa shrub also with some of the fruit. And that's the whole idea with different levels, because it creates also different habitat for different species.
This is the alternative to sun-grown coffee, so-called shade coffee, where coffee is grown under the canopy of much taller trees, creating a forest-like environment. Trees provide nitrogen for the coffee plants. Fallen leaves, the fertilizer. It's a veritable 5-star hotel for songbirds who spend the winter months here. But for Costa Rican producers, shade-grown coffee can be less appealing. More labor-intensive and less productive than sun coffee. Alejandra thinks the berry borer could change their minds. It takes 8 hours for a beetle to burrow its way through the bean. Some of that time is spent on the outside of the fruit, exposed to predators, like hungry songbirds. Are the blue-collar workers of the forests actually saving farmers money in pesticides?
We're building kind of a cage around a coffee shop. We suspect that birds are eating the coffee berry water.
One shrub is left under the cage, isolated from hungry songbirds, while another control shrub is left out in the open, where birds are free to prey on insects. Will songbirds target the coffee berry borer and protect coffee shrubs?
So during this whole year, we're going to be measuring how the infestation progress in both plants.
When did you last look at the trap?
15 days ago.
So what we've seen so far is that infestation rates are higher within the shrubs that were under the cage and lower outside. If we end up proving that some birds are really eating the beetle in a good amount, it's going to be really good for coffee farmers, because more coffee farmers will want to have more birds in their farms. And to get more songbirds in the properties, they would need to plant more trees, and that's also not only good for songbirds, but also good for the whole environment and many other species of animals. So it's a win-win situation.
Coffee has the potential to really save songbirds. Imagine if the millions of coffee drinkers were drinking coffee that only came from a forest. This would save huge amounts of habitat for our songbirds. So we know what the answers are. The real challenge is convincing people to do this.
Conserving disappearing habitat is by far the most important means of preserving songbird populations. But scientists need to know precisely what habitats and where. And for that, they need data. In Pennsylvania, the purple martins are returning home. Stutchbury's geolocator is loaded with precious data. But first, they have to recapture the bird.
I'm fishing for martins. Okay, there he's back. Catch him, Bob.
This is our first geo male of the season. I held this bird in my hand 10 months ago. We caught him in the same house. We put the geolocator on. And here we are, deja vu. I've caught him again, and this time we'll take the geolocator off. Just slides off the leg. There you go. Every bird has a different story to tell about how fast it's flying, where it goes, how long it stops. The timer value is 344 days, 17 hours, 40 minutes, and 6 seconds. Let's go back to the map. So 24th of August, he was in Pennsylvania.
The geolocator is packed with data. This bird took a leisurely 51 days to get to Brazil, but not exactly where Stutchbury thought it would go.
Everyone always thought, you ask any Brazilian where are purple martins, they'll say in the cities in southern Brazil. And when the researchers go down there to study purple martins, they go to the cities in southern Brazil. Well, we were proved wrong, because our purple martins are, look, up here. This is in one of the biggest rainforests
right where
on
the
the
red-eyed
planet.
vireos are, too.
Great news for purple martins. On the other hand, Pennsylvania populations have still been declining by 3% per year. So why? I can tell you exactly what day he started migration in Brazil, which we haven't been able to ever do that before.
No, incredible.
We know he was back on the 29th, so at most it took him 25 days to zip back. What is it about the northern populations of purple martins that make them so vulnerable? And I think the problem is climate change for purple martins. We saw with this bird that just days before he got back, he was still in Mexico. And he has no idea that the spring is cold or warm. So we think the purple martins, the northern populations, have a really hard time adjusting their arrival date to match what the temperature is doing.
These songbirds stick to a schedule. They can't seem to adapt to the extreme variables brought by climate change. Spring was early this year, so these birds have returned late. they've missed the peak abundance of insects necessary to feed themselves and their young. They may not survive.
This new issue, climate change, could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Birds are telling us that the world's climate is changing rapidly and is having drastic consequences.
In the farthest eastern tip of Turkey, biologist and conservationist Sean Shakajulu is witnessing firsthand the effects of climate change on migrating songbirds. Lake Kuyucuk and the neighboring Aras River are important stopover sites for migrating songbirds on their way from Africa to Europe.
Migratory birds depend on many different sites for their survival, both during migration and for breeding and wintering. So the disappearance of any one of these sites could be lethal to them, especially if it's a critical oasis like the Aras wetlands in the middle of inhospitable habitat.
But could warming temperatures threaten to wipe this bird paradise literally off the map?
This area, the Iğdır province of eastern Turkey, is the driest province of Turkey, which means this area will become even drier. As it gets drier, bird populations that depend on those habitats, of course, will decline. Only 50 kilometers from us, we have Mount ARTE. It's Turkey's tallest, and it's a visible sentinel for climate change because it has lost 30% of its glacier in the past 30 years. By the end of the century, there won't be a glacier on the mountain. It could also mean the end of the wetlands at its base because they are fed by glacier and snowmelt from Mount ARTE.
One of the songbirds that could be most at risk is the great reed warbler.
If the wetland dries up, great reed warblers are gone. I mean, even the name tells you that it likes reeds, which live in wetlands.
But as temperatures warm, the flora, fauna, and climate of this habitat will change, and the birds who depend on it will have to move elsewhere. This is called range shifting.
A simple way to think about it is, if climate is pushing habitats in a certain direction, it could be north, it could be uphill, and if there are already human settlements and agriculture in that direction, then those habitats will not be able to move because there are humans and fields in the way. The natural habitat simply gets squeezed between climate and people, and they're gone. I am a very determined bird watcher who's seen over 6,100 bird species in the world. And the main reason for me being so driven is that, sadly, I think by the time I'm, say, 70, many of these birds I will not be able to see. They'll be extinct or they'll be almost gone. This tells us that we have a choice. Nice. Got a hoopoe. In Sufi Islam, the hoopoe is thought to be a messenger between God and people. And it's favorite bird of my mom and my girlfriend. That's why it's so special. Well, I mean, if I weren't hopeful, I wouldn't be doing conservation because, you know, you would just give up and go home. Bird conservation initiatives have succeeded in saving about 16 bird species in the past decades that would have gone extinct otherwise. If we put our mind and resources to conservation, we can save species.
Songbird populations are experiencing unprecedented declines all around the world. Today, we have only half the birds we used to have in the 1960s. The causes are complex and manifold, but scientific research is gradually solving the mystery and developing new ways to conserve songbird populations for the future.
I am really optimistic that we can turn this around and save these birds and keep them common rather than having them spiral down into being rare and extinct. This is something we really need to embrace and take on as a challenge, not just to save birds, but to save our ecosystem in general.
This is real. This is happening. Birds are not as common as they once were. And the common denominator is that we're changing the environment faster than birds can cope with. So we have to either stop what we're doing and think about how to do it better, or pay the consequence of hearing total silence.